A Star. Alistair Crowley, The Book of the Law.
I'm Snow and welcome to the Cyberforest Speaks, where the roots and the circuitry are one, online at snowthegoth.com. In this episode, I want to talk about stereotypes, reputation, and how we navigate that. To debunk some myths starting off, no, we are not all Satan worshippers. Not even all Satanists or Satanisms are Satan worshippers in any theistic sense. For many Satanisms, such as LaVeyan Satanism, Satan is an idea rather than any divine entity. For those of us operating outside of a heavily Christian-influenced or reactionary framework, we may never even think about Satan, devils, or demons. We do not sacrifice children, virgins, the ill, or the elderly. Some people in certain traditions do practice blood offerings or animal sacrifice, but under guidance, after training, and in sanitary conditions. But your average common garden pagan most likely is not doing this. No, not all heathens are Nazis. Some are, and many heathen groups are guilty of falling for the no true Scotsman fallacy when trying to discuss this, but an increasingly vocal and visible number of heathens are very much anti-Nazism, anti-fascist, pro-LGBTQIA+, and politically towards the left. Not all pagans are into crystals, feathers, bones, or Heilung. Again, some are, and the mid to late 20th century New Age movement that followed on from the hippies popularized this image, but plenty of us do not walk around caked in mud wearing animal skins and trying to recreate the forest floor on our shrines. Not all occultists wear black and dwell in candlelit rooms poring over tomes. Again, some do, and research can be a fun and informative activity, but plenty of occultists dress like anyone else might. Anecdotally, a not insignificant number of occultists and esotericists that I know work in tech as coders or programmers and dress accordingly. Not all witches think they can curse the moon. I don't even know what to say about this, but no, just no. In reality, plenty of pagans and occultists are normal, quote-unquote, people whose beliefs and practices may differ from those of other religious or spiritual or philosophical persuasions, but otherwise they still have to work, eat, drink, exercise, and so on, just as anyone else does. I'm reminded of anecdotes of goths being met with startled reactions and surprise when they eat normal food, as if all goths are supposed to drink blood from bejeweled goblets or eat raw meat or eat nothing at all, or when Kerry King of Slayer has mentioned in interviews being met with shock when he goes to the cinema to see a film, as if he's supposed to brood in a dungeon somewhere when not working on more guitar riffs. A significant push has been made across pagandom and occultdom to work towards normalizing these paths as being religions worthy of respect, as much as any more mainstream or popular one might be. This has led to a decline in people undertaking photo shoots for their work or appearing at events, rituals and such, looking like reenactors or fantasy LARPers. Not that there's anything wrong with dressing as though you're an extra from the next cinematic adaptation of a Tolkien work, or as if you walked right out of the 12th century, but it is not necessarily practical and can often be perceived to add a sense of pretend to things. From an external viewpoint, if dressing as an early Norse settler on Iceland seems to be a requirement for engaging with heathenry, or stroking a beard thoughtfully whilst wearing a cloak and being covered in tattoos of various obscure sigils seems to be a requirement for engaging with John Dee's Enochian materials or Thelema or such, that is going to deter a lot of people from not only considering exploring these things for themselves, but also from taking these things seriously. First impressions, whether we like it or not, do carry weight and significance. This is also where it becomes very important to consider symbols. Heathens wearing a Mjolnir may attract a lot of attention for it, or none at all. Some see Thor's hammer and simply think of Marvel Comics, metal bands or bikers, whilst others view it as a religious symbol or a symbol of hate. LGBTQ+ allies may consider wearing a pride badge or an ally badge or such on their jacket to help offset the risk of any potentially concerning or worrying symbols. This is also where it becomes important to be a positive and accurate example of your religion, tradition, practice, or path. We are all, at some point or another, someone's first encounter with such a person, and firsts of any sort are often considered to be representative. If the first Thelemite someone encounters is open-minded, generous, willing to explain things and answer questions, in favour of queer rights, and so on, that goes a long way in the minds of outsiders with regards to views of Thelema. If someone's first encounter is with a closed-minded, argumentative bigot who thinks all questions are stupid, That too goes a long way. On another note, if every pagan dresses and gives the impression of being the stereotypical hippie, that gives the impression that these religions' past traditions and practices are for a certain type of person. Similarly, if every heathen dresses like they just walked out of the Vikings TV series, or every druid looks like they walked right out of an Asterix comic, this may do little to encourage people from other economic backgrounds, social backgrounds, cultures, linguistic backgrounds, ethnicities, and so on from considering exploring these things further. I have always been very in favour of the push towards normalisation of these religions and such. The idea of attending a party hosted by co-workers and the host just happens to have a shrine to Apollo on the side in their living room, or just happens to have the lunar cycle marked out on their wall calendar, has always struck me as nice. It is meaningful, it is sincere, and it is integrated into their life without needing to be flashy, showy, elaborate, or expensive. Not that there's anything wrong with showy or elaborate. I do like both black metal and the band Kiss after all. But these things challenge stereotypes and impact the reputation of the individual as well as what they are seen to be representing. If we want these religions and traditions to grow, to flourish, to be healthy, then being mindful of what we do, how we do it, and why we do it becomes of even greater importance than it should already be. As it says in the Havamal,
76. Cattle die, kinsmen die. One dies oneself the same, but reputation never dies, for whoever gets himself a good one. 77. Cattle die, kinsmen die. One dies oneself the same. I know one thing that never dies, the renown of every dead man.
There is a reason that when people pass, my response is, may they be carried safely, welcomed warmly, and remembered fondly. There is a reason for people talking of how those we lose are never truly gone if they are remembered. But reputations are not only the property of the dead. Consider how far you might steer clear of something or someone if you hear negatives about them, even sometimes without evidence, cause, or reason. If someone declares something to be bad, people will avoid it. If your community has a reputation for being unwelcoming at best or hostile at worst towards black, indigenous, and other people of colour, towards people whose native language is not English, towards the less physically able, towards those of different economic or financial standing, towards LGBTQIA+ people, towards people assigned female at birth, ask why that is, ask what you can do, whether individually or collectively, to tackle that, and even if it may be necessary to leave that space and find another, or start your own. I've always been of the mindset that the collective is comprised of individuals, that the needs of the many do outweigh the needs of the few, but it is the actions, thoughts, and words of each individual that ripple out and impact the collective, sparking collective actions, thoughts, and words. Personally, I run counter to a lot of stereotypical things of relevance in pagandom and occultdom. I am a heathen who is also vegan and prefers being clean-shaven, who is queer, bisexual, and gender fluid. I am a heathen whose focus is not primarily on things attested to in Norse lore or archaeology. I'm a polytheistic pagan who sincerely, actively, certainly believes the gods are very much real, active, and existing. I'm a monistic polytheist and see no contradiction here. As an aside, I have written about monistic polytheism on my site, but will likely go into it in the show. I'll link to some posts on the page for this episode if you, dear listener, are curious. I am an astrologer who does not really deal in archetypes, so much as seeing gods and spirits in the chart and correspondences. I'm a rune reader who does not use the North Fudark script or the old Icelandic or Norwegian poems, but primarily my own Gothic system, again, link on the episode page on the site. I'm a tarot reader who currently only owns one deck and put off buying a deck for years and years until I found one that resonated with me. I am a devotee of various gods and goddesses attested to in ancient Egypt, but not exclusively. I am a Stoic, but not anti-emotions. I am a Platonist, but not at all a monotheist. Most of my worship occurs at an indoor shrine, not at some outdoor bonfire, and for the most part I have always been a solitary practitioner, albeit with an increased sense of community online. I have always actively sought to go beyond arbitrary lines drawn on maps or timelines that people are often pushed to have to draw their inspiration from. I only have a handful of statues, icons, or prints, and again put off purchasing those for years until it seemed appropriate. And whilst I love the idea of living in remote wilderness, in the middle of nowhere, without others around, that has little to nothing to do with my religious practice, and much more to do with my being so asocial and cynical. In other ways, I do fit certain stereotypes. I am both a goth and a devotee of Anne Morgan. I am an astrologer and a devotee of Isis, or Aset as she is known by her Kemetic or Egyptian name. I am a heathen who likes beer, although I do not drink mead on account of the aforementioned veganism. Being so Greco-Roman influenced in my practice, it feels fairly cliche to like wine so much too, for that matter. I'm a mage who's very much a fan of the magical papyri tradition of the ancient Near East. I'm a mystic with a meditation practice. I think it interesting that in our communities we also have stereotypes and misconceptions that are perhaps more niche or specific than those from outsiders. For example, that spirit workers, or those said to have active quote-unquote God phones, constantly hear the numinous, and if you do not experience that, you are a poor spirit worker, a bad witch, or have no God phone. Or that if you do not have your relevant text or texts largely memorized, then you do not really know what you're talking about. Or that if you don't have sources or references for your points, then your points are invalid. And contrariwise, if you have too many sources or references, then you're simply repeating what others in the past have said, with no innovation or creativity of your own, and without adapting things to make them relevant for when and where you are now. Some of these things do come from wider society. For instance, the issues around sources are very much rooted in attitudes within and towards academia and education. Also, Western society stands that if you speak too tentatively, then you're uncertain and don't really know anything. But if you speak too confidently, then you're dictating and authoritarian. Things like this impact our communities because they impact us as individuals. Having people around, whether online or offline, to exchange ideas and resources with, to discuss beliefs and practices with, can be extremely beneficial, but it is also not really a requirement. There's nothing inherently wrong with being a solitary practitioner any more than there is anything wrong with belonging to a large group that meets twice a month. But when part of a group, no matter how loosely you're connected to them or how loosely the group is organized, your reputation impacts how people perceive the group as much as the reputation of the group impacts you as an individual. We're responsible for our words, actions, and deeds, and trying to do better as individuals will lead to our communities doing better overall. It all ripples out. Next time we shall talk about terminology and definitions. Until then.
Oh, why can't I live a life for me? Why should I take the abuse that's served? Why can't they see they're just like me? It's the same in the whole wide world.